David. And thank you, Yolanda and David, and a lot of other people who have been supporting the people up in Lomas for a long time. It's been a long struggle, and sometimes when struggles continue for a number of years, people kind of get tired, and it's difficult to keep attention and focus. And I also am aware, here at the border, I mean, we're all aware there's so many different issues that we're concerned about. We have people trying to find safe refuge, fleeing violence in Juarez. Our government's not giving them asylum, not providing any relief. We have the situation in Arizona, kind of a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, and there's a lot of things that draw our attention. So I'm really grateful that you're able to be here today. I can share a few things with you, but the real message and the real face of the struggle in Lomas del Poleo is the residents. Whatever we do as activists, as people of faith who support them, they live and have been living in this situation with the guards, the cement posts, and the barbed wire since 2003. So there's some really tough people. And I think part of what has happened is because of the violence and the intimidation that the Zaragozas used, and then later on some monetary payoffs to get people out of there, the really tough people, the people who are really committed to getting ownership of their land, have stayed there, and they're not going to go until there's a just and a peaceful way of reconciling their situation. And in some of their cases, they don't want to go, period. They want the title to that land, and they want to stay there. David mentioned a little bit of the history. It was really a desolate, barren piece of land. According to the Zaragozas, their grandfather purchased it in 1963, but they never settled it or developed it. In 1974, Luis Urbina, a Mexican citizen, had come up to the border, and he was looking for a settlement to form a community for people who wanted to kind of live, have a ranch, have a small garden or something like that. And I was fortunate enough to interview him before he died about 6 years ago. And he brought out his documentation. He had letters from government officials, from federal judges, from authorities in Juarez. He went through all of the appropriate processes, asking if he could settle on that land. And he himself heard about Pedro Zaragoza Vizcaria, who's deceased, the father of Pedro Zaragoza Fuentes. He called him on the phone. He actually spoke to this guy on the phone. He said, "We're here in this area, we want to settle here. You know, is this your land? Is there any way we can occupy it?" He said, "I don't know anything about it." He said, "If you want to get titles or something, you have to go to the federal government." So he did go to the federal government. He showed me a letter from a judge that said, "You can settle on the land, but we're not going to develop the infrastructure for you, so that's going to be up to you." So from 1974 until the present, people, he himself and people he invited, settled up there. And as he said, the government didn't immediately do anything. The people carved out roadways, they built pallet houses, eventually they built brick houses, cinder block houses. Trees began to grow, which in a land dispute are proof that people have been living there, or you wouldn't have trees. Trees don't grow in the desert unless somebody plants and waters them. And then in the 80s, a community organization up on the mesa, they began to pool their money together. They got the federal government to donate cinder block, sand, and cement, and some lumber, and they built a school, and that school is still in the middle of the colonia. It's a federally registered school in Mexico City. It has a clave, a federal number, so it's a federally registered school that's been in operation for about 20 years, that the Zaragoza guards have tried to close. They've intimidated the students. They dug an 8-foot trench around the building to try to keep the kids from being able to get in there. And there's still 12 or 13 kids going to that school. Agustina, who's not able to be with us this morning, her daughter, Marieli, just a tiny little kid, she goes in and out of there every day. So that school also is evidence that if this was purely private land, there's no way you could build a federal school, have it registered, and still have it occupied. So the pressure continues on the people. From about 250 to 300 families, there's now 15 families left in Lomas del Poleo. And the 4 or 5 families who we have worked most closely with in recent years, they're with a lawyer named Barbara Zamora. Their cases are in the Federal Land Court, number 5, down in Chihuahua. And both of these people have been down to that courtroom. People like yourself, through your support, through your prayers. Also, a lot of people have helped us financially. The residents have raised money themselves for legal costs, transportation costs. It really has ended up being a David and Goliath kind of situation, which I think those of us who are in favor of a more just world, we're always like moved when you see a really big, powerful bully kind of picking on smaller people who don't have anywhere near as many resources. So that disparity in the two sides, I think, has motivated people to really support these residents and their quest just to have, they want to have their piece of the earth. And as David said, with the amount of time that they've been on the land, you have to occupy the land peacefully. No one else can be living on the land. During the 5-year period, if no owner comes to you and says, hey, I'm Pedro Zaragoza, there's my title, get off my land. If he never came and told you that, other people witnessed you living on the land and you had some receipts for water, electricity, and things like that, then it's supposed to be your land. You're supposed to get your title to it. From 1974 to the present, that hasn't happened, and it hasn't been for lack of evidence, it hasn't been for lack of trying on the part of the people, but it's because of the money, the influence, and the network that the Zaragozas and other people like them have. So I'm gonna shut up and let the residents kind of tell you their own story. And I don't know, are you somebody gonna translate, or who would be a good and how they want to spontaneously